Hi, I was having a little bit of technical issues, so sorry that I am a few minutes late. Hi, welcome to Reading the Revolution. My name is Marielis, and we are reading Neocolonialism. The reason that I started this channel is to educate myself and hopefully to educate myself with others, because I feel like you only get that motivation to make change, to be the revolution when you are educated. Hi, Big Bunny. Let's give me 1 second. I started off rough this today. Okay. Yeah, Twitch is giving me some issues, some login issues. So if you just give me 1 moment, I'll get back to the program. Okay. All right. All right, we're back. All right, thank you. Yes, so the order, the way that we work this stream is we're on air for 2 hours. And during those 2 hours, we first spend the first 30 minutes reviewing what we have read up until this point. We are currently on chapter 6. So we did quite a bit of reading last time. And then we go into the reading. We take breaks and watch videos on Instagram. Or if you have suggestions, we go in. Maybe we do a little bit of research. Yeah, so that is how we do it. You're not a real streamer without some technical difficulties. So you're on the right track. Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, so let's get to our notes. Okay, neocolonialism. Again, I was supposed to do this, but I did not. I spent most of the time doing notes, the free time, because of course I do this for fun. So the free time that I have, I go in and do the notes. But one thing that I wanted to do is to kind of like every time just like highlight the things that I'm going through, because we have quite a bit of notes now. So I cannot go over everything. Again, you can go to my Discord and you can see the notes yourself. So we're going to kind of like speed through some of this. We know that our author is Kwame Nkrumah. The focus of the book is Africa, because he was the first prime minister of Ghana and helped Ghana get their independence. A lot of inspiration there that brought him to the point that he is now, including the civil rights movement. We learned how terrible neocolonialism is, even compared to colonialism and imperialism, which were the predecessors. We know that it came after World War II. This is when the colonial powers were losing control because they needed to worry about their own population, while these territories, the colonies, were starting to want to get their independence, so they couldn't fight 2 wars at once. And so comes neocolonialism. Neocolonialism was so much more profitable for them. If they knew, they would have done neocolonialism from the start. A lot of the aid that Africa gets is military aid to protect resources, at least in the beginning portions, or in the beginning stages of neocolonialism. Anyways, Kwame gives us some information about Africa at the time, and so we went and compared some of these details. So what we know is that Africa has grown in population tremendously, but it is not using its capabilities of production for its own good. Most of it is going to the Western countries. And one example was that if Africa could, basically, if it used its own resources for itself, it would be already a completely modern continent. Yeah, so neocolonialism shows itself in contracts and agreements, typically in the form of finance. And this is when a lot of the colonies, once they get their independence, they're kind of in bad shape because their people are not doing very well. So many of them keep their connection to their colonial mothers. I hate to say it that way because it makes me kind of disgusted, but kind of like keep that umbilical cord tied to their previously colonial power because they needed to keep their people alive. But these contracts that they then put under are extortion and completely not beneficial and a big trap for the territories. Okay, I'm going to start reading some of this because I don't remember exactly everything. So not even South Africa escapes. Okay, yeah, so this is one thing that we just wanted to point out is that even though, South Africa is more industrialized than the other countries, it is still very much dependent on the outside financing. So it's not producing its own things. It can't survive on its own. So it is just as vulnerable as the other countries. And then when you look at the details of South Africa, even today, you realize that they have such a great unemployment and so many of their people are not doing well. So mainly when we're talking about industrialized South Africa, we're actually talking about industrialized white South Africa, really, although that is not exclusive. Then we went into the obstacles of economic progress. And what were they? The main thing was the splitting up of countries. So they encourage individualism. They want small countries, basically divide and conquer. And that is, they have many different examples, but in the beginning, you have Spain and Portugal doing a lot of that. France, does it as well. Yeah. And so these contracts are extremely difficult to get out of, even when countries, the small countries, will basically decline the agreements because they are predatory. They get penalized by the parent company. Again, remember that these countries during this time have just become independent, and therefore they're still struggling, but they want to negotiate good contracts. But when they do try to, they get penalized. So it's not, you can consider it a contract, but is it really? It's more of like, they don't really have a choice whether to accept it or not. From 5 viewers to, okay, alrighty then. Yeah, so in this example, Guinea France took everything, all of the support that it was giving Guinea at the time, even the light bulbs. So just completely sick behavior. And yeah, so I was going to say, you can see some of what France is doing these days with all of the media and, everybody being aware of what is going on over there with the actual neocolonialist contracts and that sort of thing. You can see that now they want to have something that can be seen in the media as positive. So they're renaming all of their agreements and all of the ways that they support the African nations. And I actually have an Instagram clip for you guys, and I'll show you guys later on example of that. So, they're trying to brand themselves differently, but it's still the same shit. Some history of treatment and obstacles to development and unity of Africa. So here we're talking about how they use the nations to kind of trade in agreements. So they're basically property that they can just give to one another so that, hey, don't fight that war. How about we just give you this territory and that sort of thing. So you have some examples of that here. And they sometimes even fight wars, but there's still some negotiations. The actual countries themselves that are being traded don't have a lot to say, even when they plead, even when they have, diplomatic conversations. They get what they get based on what the colonial powers decide on. And when you have, leaders, as we know, we have the example of Gaddafi. Again, I'm looking for if we can find a book that we can read on what happened there. But you have a leader who liberates their country, and they get murdered, right? First, they get called inhumane. First, they get called a criminal that's doing terrible things to their people. At the same time, you have the military of the British military intervening and, having bases there, militarizing and even assisting. Basically the people that are against the government or against change or have any type of discontent of what is going on, they'll militarize them, they'll brainwash them, they'll put them against their own people. There's a lot of murdering, and then basically a positive intervening is what they would say. We're trying to stop bad things from happening to the countries of Africa, and that's why we need to take these leaders out, and that's what they do. And then you have the bootlickers. So there's that. I'm sure we have a few of those. The leaders and presidents and prime ministers of some of the African countries that basically are defeatists. They give in to the system that doesn't actually work, but they give into it. And as long as they're getting some pocket money, pocket change, then they're okay with keeping the system. Okay, well then Kwame did not give us just a bunch of problems without giving us some solutions. So he tells us the solution is a unified Africa, right? We've heard that before. Continental economic cooperation and planning, and he gives us examples: trade and production, unification of policies. African companies have, more space to grow. Agriculture can be modernized. And so there's a lot of positive aspects, not just to the countries, but also to the business owners of the countries. There's a lot of growth opportunity there. And so we see here that not a lot has changed. The population has blown up, and they have a little bit of increase in intra-country trade, but it is basically crap compared to the growth of the population. We have a little bit here of some examples of how things have improved since the book was published. In my opinion, it's not really much, and some of it doesn't seem to be working very well. More solutions. He wrote another book, Africa Must Unite. So that's something that if you want to hear a little bit more about what he says on that, but basically is what we said: national banks run by the nations themselves, using their own resources versus, financing from the West with these predatory interest rates and agreements that are basically more extraction mechanisms for the territories or for the colonies of the territories. So then we have the social stuff when it comes to the obstacles. You have people saying that all you have to do is decolonialize yourself without really taking into consideration that we're past that and we're more in the neocolonialism aspect of it. And it's a lot harder to get out of this one than it was actually to get out of the first one. You have international financing monopolies. A lot of those companies you would just think of the biggest banking companies that this is how they got their start, by extorting. So no heroes there. Monopoly capitalism is the last stage of capitalism. Neocolonialism was needed to get here. And then the industries that it affects, basically everything. They will invest on, basically they will build up the infrastructure to the point that they can that they are comfortable with, where they're still under the control and still not able to fully be industrialized. But they'll provide their transport, their public utilities, whatever small little manufacturing. All of that stuff comes from finance, from outside financing. The owners are Westerners, basically. So none of it really belongs to the African nations. So those are more obstacles, because then you have to basically take back all of your industries. Economic obstacles. When independence comes, countries are typically in bad shape. Okay, so we did kind of discuss that. So that's why they need to borrow. Growth in production. Western world requires more raw materials. Yeah, so then you have a cycle of extraction, because the more they extract, the more they produce, and then they want to extract more and that sort of thing. But because Africa is not industrialized, and they don't have the equipment to manage the growth, they don't have the pesticides to manage the growth, they don't have basically what they need to manage the growth, and therefore it's more expensive to produce more. And so the more Africa produces, the less they make. And if they don't make more, then they don't get, then the contracts, basically stop, and they don't get their stuff purchased, which is, to me, is insane. They're going to purchase your shit, you can't give in to the threats. But of course, I'm not an economist or a leader of Africa. Maybe there's more intricacies. I've never seen any of these contracts myself, but I feel like a lot of this has been fear-driven. And also the fear is really real, because some of these, agreements are about the health or food. And so one of the hardships, one of the growing pains would be your people not getting those things. Or, maybe they will. Maybe you will be able to find another partner. Maybe you can find a partner within, Africa, maybe somebody else. Maybe somebody can give you a better agreement, but you don't know. So as soon as you, let that agreement go, you're kind of like, in limbo. And considering neocolonialism and economics are very, very tied together, this is kind of later chapter. But basically, the dollar was basically propped up by the extraction of the African goods. Later, it was propped up by the oil from the West Asia, of course, in Saudi Arabia, whatever. But before that, it was this stuff. And so if you couldn't earn in dollar, then you couldn't buy in dollar. And if somebody, for example, the US has an agreement with you and you decide that you're not going to take it, they can make it so that you don't get dollars. And then even if you want to buy from somebody else, even if you want to have an agreement with somebody else, you don't have the money to buy or, to do business. So it is quite predatory. Social help to economic domination is another way that they it's basically propaganda. So at this time, there are also European leaders saying that it is best that Africa keeps their relationship with its mother country, that Africa should focus on themselves, feeding themselves, and that sort of thing. So they kind of like throw this like, just focus on feeding your people, versus industrializing yourself, which is very interesting, because Kwame tells us that you can't feed your people if you don't have the infrastructure. And so you need to have infrastructure to be able to feed your people. But then you have other propaganda as well. So you have the religious people, you have the social justice people, all of those things, they always come with strings, with, very heavy strings attached. Okay, so chapter 4, imperialism, imperialist finance. Okay, so I'm going to read some of this stuff. Imperialism is the highest stage of capitalism. We already knew that. The latecomers, so you have the U.S. and Germany. This is before the wars. Created the cartels and the syndicates, which brought them sooner to a higher stage of monopoly. So while British and the Portuguese and the Spanish and the Italians and the French were focusing on colonializing or actually managing their colonies, the U.S. and Germany kind of came later with their mergers and cartels and their financial systems, which is what basically controls the market today. So we have the mergers, the patent agreements, the selling arrangements, so all of these type of schemes. Okay, the Western world go into war for control. Yeah, so another thing that we learned is that it's not just about getting things for cheaper. It's also about getting power, getting territory, having control over the resources in case you get into a war. Then you have control of the resources so that maybe your enemies can't purchase whatever it is that they need, whether it's something they need to survive or whether it's something that they need to produce weapons. And then the other thing that they're scared of is, of course, socialism and capital and what is the other one? Communism, because they take away from the industrial world the people and the resources of that land. So this capitalistic, imperialistic mentality is very superior in their mind to everything else. They should have, access to everything. They have this audacity about themselves where you can't even take your own people, your own land outside of the system of extraction because then you become a threat. Also, socialism is very contagious to the actual people. And the people, this is not the priority. These are not who we listen to. We don't just go around listening to the people or anything like that. But it's really just about money. So again, you guys can read through some of these examples. I did put in quite a bit of examples, and especially why they have to go into neocolonialism and the troubles that they have back at home and that sort of thing. So we'll skip some of this. Okay. When socialist countries form, they remove, okay, so we kind of went over that. The oil industry is backed by most powerful banking interests. So in this book, we learn and we see a lot of these same names that you've seen before quite a bit. And they are basically just, monopolizing and controlling everything, every part of the market, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's mining, whether it's providing services, whatever it is that is needed. These people, these capitalists, control it. And then, he threw in a jab at me. When he talked about parasitic jobs. So he's mainly talking about, marketing and, the propaganda machine of basically jobs for profit versus for consumption, which he has a point. We, in the capitalistic world, we work for profit, not for just maintaining. So this is kind of like a socialist capitalist difference. The U.S. today is the number one investor in Africa, mainly in mining and extraction and information and communication tech. Yeah. So in the book, he basically, so here we go through it. He basically goes through the progression of the U.S. financial domination. And here right in the beginning, I just let us know the answer to the whole process. He warned about U.S. financing. Because they were taking over, and his warning was not heeded, and the U.S. is basically the one that owns the majority of the African goods. Okay, so what is the process? Let's see. Maybe we'll skip through some of these and maybe hit the most important. I didn't highlight anything, so I don't exactly know which are the most important, but we'll just read through them. Okay, post-World War II, German banks were merged or bought by American finance capital. France had some pushback words. They were a little upset when this started to happen and trusted less in the British because they saw them as the long arm of the U.S. European countries were trying to be strategic of where to invest their capital, choosing primarily those that produce armaments, mines, and oil. France kind of deviated a little bit, investing in some of the less advanced European countries. Monopolies were starting to be formed, created by Germany and the United States. Financial power started to go in the direction of Africa and Asia after World War II. So they're taking their peak and basically capitalizing. The Morgans and Rockefellers and some European banks decided to create these influential committees. I don't think I have it here, but it is part of what they did. So let's see, influencer for the aggressive progression into neocolonialism as colonialism started to die. So we have the America's productive force, cheap raw materials to take home, produce finished goods. Less developed colonies need to raise their standard of life. And so there comes the banks, land clearing equipment, electrical projects, road reconstruction, housing, schools, hospitals. So as these countries are starting to need to basically upgrade themselves, these financial committees that have decided together what the plan is, how we're going to treat these people, what kind of deals or not deals we're going to give them. They got together, made this plan, and then, when the African countries, or not just African countries, by the way, when these prior colonial countries were starting to need this assistance, they went to this bank, and then they got these absolutely awful deals. At the same time, people are losing jobs in the Western world because the profits made outside, basically less mining and those type of jobs. So there's a little bit of a change in industry in the Western countries. Banks. Okay, this is where we have we're seeing the progression up until this point, and here's where we see what the U.S. is doing and why they come into the problem that causes them to change from the gold-backed dollar to the petrol-backed dollar. So banks using returns from internal investment to buy foreign investments. So basically, they're using more than they have, and so they're in a pickle. Nkrumah states this was causing the adverse balance in the payments crisis. So if they lend money and then they buy, so technically they have the money that they lended because it's still theirs, but they don't actually have it in their banks, in their vaults, they don't actually have the gold. And then they're buying things with the money that they don't technically have, then there's no security. And this is a payment crisis issue that causes the petrodollar. So Nkrumah was describing the conditions that caused the U.S. to move to the petrodollar. So this is part of what I do in the beginning as well as I'm going through. When I do my notes after these readings, I will do research to see what has happened since. So up until where we just left off, sorry about that, after where we just left off, we saw the progression that led to what we know that Nkrumah doesn't know, but he expected. So the U.S. was hemorrhaging gold and dollars outward through foreign investment, chasing higher profits abroad, military spending overseas. Gold was leaving Fort Knox faster than it was coming in. Nixon ended dollar gold convertibility in 1971, and the petrodollar system was created in 1973 and 1974. Convinced Saudi Arabia to price oil exclusively in dollars and recycle those dollars back into U.S. Treasury bonds. So basically, that is how we, or the U.S., became this. It was already a superpower before then, but how it became what it is today. So today, the petrodollar is a neocolonial invention that forces every country to do business in U.S. dollars if they want to get oil. So this is a stronghold. We don't necessarily see it or talk about it as a stronghold, but that's exactly what it is. Okay, continuation of chapter 4, since we took that little break in current events. Okay, monopolies, merchandise, mass production, and refusal to buy even if cheaper goods is the tug of war that the neocolonial powers were fighting amongst each other. So still exploitation of the less developed was more profitable. So basically, they were fighting the internal war of, selling to each other at cheaper prices than their own country is able to manufacture and sell to its own people. So that kind of causes an issue with the actual, with their own economies, and puts them in a bit of the same situation that they have been putting the neocolonial territories. But still, their main, source of profit comes from doing this to the neocolonial territories. So even if it's done to them, it doesn't mean that they're just going to learn their lesson and be like, you know what, it does suck. We shouldn't do that to others. No, they continue because that's how they're making their money. Okay, and then here we talk about how this is propaganda. We didn't see it as propaganda back then, but basically they start infiltrating the educational, the cultural, the social domains, bringing indigenous population to Western way of thinking, making it easier to continue to extract and extort. UN was a big part of this stage with its whole aid campaigns. Excuse me. It is pleasant to feel that you are helping your neighbors and at the same time increasing your own profits, said some professor of undeveloped countries, of economic aid to undeveloped countries. So very specific job. Chapter 5. So then then we went into chapter 5. Sorry about that. Okay, so, and we actually almost finished chapter 5. I think we have a couple of pages left. So here we're talking about monopolies. He gave a lot of examples. I don't think I gave too many examples in my notes, but monopoly capitalism and the American dollar, the end of the empire, argues Kwame, was a time of even greater profits for the previous colony powers and now the new neocolonial. So Britain increased their profits by a bunch in 1965 compared to when the Second War ended. But this is what it is today. It's disgusting. So rich countries have drained $152 trillion from the global south since 1960. And then this is Claude. To put that in perspective, the entire U.S. GDP is about $27 trillion per year. So the extraction since 1965 represent roughly 5 to 6 years of the entire American economy. Comparison, the 400% profit increase that we talked about, basically he's saying that's modest, is nothing compared to what they've done since then. Global North countries extract around 10 to 11 trillion from the global south annually. So this is wealth that they're taking from Africa. Global South annually, well, that was the end of a sentence. Yeah, from the Global South annually, and that's compared to foreign aid flowing the other direction, which is about 30 times smaller. So for every $1 given in aid, $30 flows back out. Yeah, this is a thing that really upsets me because it's like, Africa, come on. Come on. Okay. The debt trap. So then we have the debt trap, which is depressing. Developing states paid $1.4 trillion in foreign debts service in 2023 alone, with interest costs hitting a 20-year high of $406 billion. Colonial extraction, where resources flow outward to creditors while domestic development remains underfunded. So, yeah, I mean, this is depressing, y'all. This is depressing. Okay, this is kind of like where this is a lot of what we read last time, so I'm gonna just read it. Read it all since we don't have to skip this stuff. At times, all this was at its early stage when the book was published. There is a British apologist leader of neocolonialist power saying they don't know what neocolonialism means. We need to always remember that this is me just being frustrated. Again, I share all of my notes, so some of this stuff is just like, little notes that I'm giving you guys when you read over the notes, kind of just letting you know my frustration. Because you have these leaders basically saying, I don't know what neocolonialism is. At the same time, their country has placed at this time, there are British military bases placed all over the Northern Africa. And their goal is to hold back the development of the territorial countries. So at the time that they're doing neocolonialism, he doesn't know what it means. Okay, so progression. So he goes into a little bit of details. He hits us with a few propagandas so that we can have our eyes open. So let's read. Germany and Japan insert themselves back into the game of neocolonialism, fighting for a share against the dominant U.S. Oh, yeah, thanks. So, we're rooting for Germany and Japan getting back in the game of neocolonialism. Socialism has its rise. Anti-communist campaigns begin because what? We don't want socialism. Communism is terrible. We need to start that propaganda. Propaganda is led by capitalist monopoly leaders. So this is who starts these messages. And these are the messages that they're saying. Selling capitalism as the idealized, harmonious civilization that must be cherished at all costs. I mean, isn't that what we kind of like grew up thinking? Like capitalism and democracy, and they go hand in hand together, the same thing. You can't have capitalism without democracy, and this is how people can better themselves, and this is how you get really autonomy over your life, and da-da-da, and it's idealized and cherished. And so most of this is just propaganda. As independent, previously colonized states start to organize, capitalists decide to motivate them to choose capitalists as their economy structure versus socialism. So now they start to motivate those countries that have, just got their independence. Like, you have two choices. You're either going to go capitalist or you're going to go socialist. This is how they motivate them to choose capitalists. International Cooperation Administration says that they're not prepared to finance publicly owned industries. So we know that communism and socialism tend to have a little bit of like the government owns a lot of the public services. We know that they're kind of they work together, socialism and communism. So they are basically trying to discourage the formation of these things, because remember, these are newly independent countries that need financing. They need assistance. So they're like, well, we don't know if we can help you if it's publicly owned. Okay, propaganda, the London Times, 1964. The two great objectives of Britain's foreign policy must be to prevent the non-communist world from being penetrated by communism. Prevent communism. And secondly, to prevent her own access to trade and investment in any part of the world from being barred or limited. So we don't want communism, and we don't want land that we cannot own. We don't want to be limited to how much we can invest in any part of this fucking earth. So, those are our goals. No communism. And we want to own shit. Okay. The French in South Vietnam assist guerrillas so that they don't have to pay the state. America played the role of anti-imperialists using propaganda to paint them as those who also escaped imperialism. Poor America, they're just like us. They also escaped imperialism from the British. Oh my God. And they're basically saying imperialists are so bad, as their neocolonial market share was rapidly growing in the global South. As American monopoly grew and Europe was healing from the last war, American dollar was used to help Europe, propping up even more the dollar and helping it take over more of the extraction and finance markets where Europe once had a hold. So we know that after the war, the Second War, not all of the European countries were in good shape. And then America was like, this is our chance. So they went in, they started taking shit over. NATO's military creation was heavily influenced by the growth in exploration for metal and mineral resources in Africa. So this is why NATO has a military. This organization of all these countries trying to do good in the world has a military. And this is why, because of extraction. So, yeah. And I talked about this a little bit already. Committees of European and American bankers was created together to infiltrate Africa. And again, the same names. I feel like Nkrumah now, because there was a section in one of the chapters where he was like naming these countries. And he was like, you see them everywhere. They're here, they're there. What? Okay, so we're basically done. I couldn't... Yeah, so they're here, and then he was just frustrated, and I'm starting to get frustrated because literally they are everywhere. It's the same goddamn capitalist companies over and over again. Okay, and industry monopolies are created to manipulate prices and have a mechanism to deprive their enemies of resources. We covered that. Threats of using synthetic alternatives, and then that was another thing that they do to try to discourage the actual the countries with the resources from deciding not to sell to them. They're like, well, we'll just make something. We'll just make something up. We'll just make a synthetic version of it, which I believe that they have done. I think they did in India with some stuff that they. I think it's like some yarn or some type of material that they make clothes out of. So they have actually done that. Let me see. There was one. Yes, this is the one. There was one video that I wanted to show. I mentioned it when I was doing when I was going over the notes. So let's take a break and watch this video.
France has new branding for its relationship with Africa.
Et en effet, c'est un continent que je ne veux plus que la France regarde d'un côté comme étant un précaré.
We are now in the era of what France calls Africa Forward. Military bases are now called security partnerships. Aid is framed in terms as solidarity and investment. And the France-Africa...
So here, sorry to interrupt it, but here's just to kind of like say where I got my notes earlier. Here's what we see France just basically taking neocolonialism and renaming it. It's not the same. It's not the same.
Summits, held since 1973, have in recent years been renamed as the Africa-France Summits, with Africa shown the courtesy of being named first. France's colonial legacy in the continent is one of violence, domination, and extraction. And under its unofficial policy, known as Françafrique, France continued a system of military, economic, and political control over its former colonies. In recent years, though, 7 African countries have expelled French troops or closed military bases. But the impact of France's colonial days continues to be felt today. Several former French colonies rank among the poorest in the world. Even those that do relatively well, like Algeria and Morocco, aren't among the largest African economies. France also significantly influences the monetary policy of 14 of its former colonies in West and Central Africa through the CFA franc, a currency pegged to the euro and guaranteed by Paris. And France has long been accused of extracting resources from its former colonies and meddling with internal politics to ensure friendly heads of state. By choosing Nairobi instead of Paris for this latest summit, France is trying to show it's ready for a fresh start, out with the old Françafrique and in with Africa forward. French President Emmanuel Macron has been meeting around 30 African heads of state in Nairobi, discussing topics like innovation, partnerships, and investments. But a military agreement between Nairobi and Paris, signed in 2025, may suggest what France is really after. The agreement grants 800 French soldiers diplomatic-style immunity while training members of the Kenyan Defense Forces in the port city of Mombasa. France calls it a security partnership. Critics call it neocolonialism. Françafrique under a new name. They point out that France issues more deportation orders than other European countries, up to 35,000 people a year, mostly from former colonies. But that's no longer called deportation. Instead, France calls it concerted management of migration flows. Historically, Françafrique was also a cultural project. By 2025, 85% of French speakers in the world are expected to be African. And French officials have been open about how Africa's French speakers are seen as giving France an edge over other countries.
We also have something that China doesn't have. We have a huge diaspora, and this is actually a source of opportunities for France.
It's clear that France wants to try something new. The thing is, many observers say, long after the Africa-France summit has ended, it's unlikely the same will be said for Françafrique.
Does France want to be the president of all of these African countries? I hope that that these leaders know better. Okay, that's disappointing. Okay, let's get to the reading. All right. Okay, so we're basically almost done with chapter... Oh, I thought we had less than that. Ah, there it goes. With chapter 6. So we're talking a little bit still about the monopolies. So let's kind of wrap up in monopolies and let's see what's next. Okay, well, let's see what we learned from this wrapping it up. Okay, present-day monopoly is highly variegated and spread out. While it draws its strength from its monopolistic position, it is, on the other hand, seriously exposed to the dangers that face a multiple organism that stretches its limbs to extremity in different directions. A fracture at any point can lead to a disjunction which may unbalance the structure. And the monopoly rivals are always on the alert to spot its most exposed parts in order to deliver a blow that will enable the most relentless competitor to insinuate into the broken organ. Hence, monopoly, having passed through the stages of cartelization, combine, trust, and syndicate, is today more and more making use of a further protective safeguard. That is the consortium, through which it aims through which it aims at immobilizing the rivals and disarming the associates who are permitted to join this most ravishing of imperialist contrivances. Usually in a consortium, there is a dominant party, either directly or through and with affiliates and associates, which enable it to exert the largest influence upon the affairs of the consortium. Furthermore, each of the parties to the consortium will have its own string of appendages or even a principal standing outside the consortium. All right, so this is kind of talking, I broke it up quite a bit, sorry. But basically it's talking about some of the, weaknesses of the monopolies. All continue the fight outside while those within exercise their efforts to enlarge the importance of their share of the group activities. For example, as the monopoly, it will be in control of a complex of companies connected at many levels with the production of primary materials, their processing from the original state right through all the stages of transformation into a variety of semi-finished and finished goods, from the most ordinary article to the most complicated and delicate equipment and heavy plant and machinery. The monopoly does not restrict itself to a single raw material though it will be preeminent in one or two, nor does it restrict itself to any particular department of manufacture or enterprise that may be ancillary to its basic activities, though here again it may specialize in certain lines. Many monopolies branch into real estate and land development projects as construction and contracting work bring quick and high returns and high rents. This form of capital investment is growing rapidly in the present era of enlarging industrialization and the growth of new towns, and extends to a large-scale agriculture. Okay, so I broke that up quite a bit in the beginning for some reason, but basically, it is so hot in my apartment. But basically, the monopolies have weaknesses. One of them being that they don't care to basically monopolize the entire process of a good. So this is my wording. So from raw material to finished goods to semi-finished goods to what is needed for the ancillary finished goods and all of that stuff. So they'll have all of these things, and they'll even extend to other things as well. But if one thing messes up, then it can also mess the whole chain. It's a chain reaction kind of thing. So in Africa, the consortium is making the most sinister penetrations. No worries. Yeah. No worries. Just jump back in when you're ready. In Africa, the consortium is making the most sinister penetrations. It extends from the monopolistic amalgamations of American and European finance capital, particularly those combined within the European Common Market, where financial consortia have been set up as the most effective means of profiting from the competitive struggle that is spiraling within its so-called unifying organization. The prime objective is to monopolize African resources of raw materials, not as it is claimed to assist the African countries to develop their economies. For the materials are carried off largely in their raw state or as concentrations to enhance the productive output of the imperialist countries, and to be returned to them in the form of heavy equipment for the extractive industry and the infrastructure of carrying the resources away. It is way too hot here. I need to open the door and turn off this heat thing. So give me 1 second. Yeah. Sorry about that. It is so hot. I was sweating. Can't be sweating. Okay. Whew. Yikes. My armpits are sweating. Jesus Christ. It's like a sauna in here. It's like, seriously. All right, let's continue. Yeah. It is out of revenue from the trade in these materials that the African countries look to amass part of the capital that will make it possible for them to utilize these same commodities in the service of their own development. Yeah, now you're going to hear barking dogs and stuff. So hopefully my mic is doing a good job. Paradoxically, however, these precious counters in Africa's future are meantime being used to widen the economic gap between her and the highly industrialized countries, which are hurriedly exploiting the opportunity to make good deficiencies in their economies. And if you just came in, I just want to let you know this in this channel, I do a lot of reading. But we do have notes, and we stop and we watch videos and we comment on what we've learned so far. But we also have a Discord. We have the notes where you can kind of catch up. So you can jump in and where we're at, but don't think that you're not going to be able to know where we left off. You can always see the notes. And in the next one, because I do stream daily, in the next one, right in the beginning of the stream, I go through it, all of the notes there as well. Okay. And sometimes this is what happens also when I stop reading, is that I forget where I left off. Okay. Paradoxically, however, these precious counters in Africa's future, I believe I read this, but it's okay, future are meantime being used to widen the economic gap between her and the highly industrialized countries, which are hurriedly exploiting the opportunity to make good deficiencies in their economies. Since those who are carrying on the exploitations are also the monopolies who manipulate the markets for primary products at the one end and the price for the fine products at the other, the countries of origin must be pinned down to a long wait before they can tackle on a major scale the capital problem facing all of the developing countries of seriously raising the standard of life of their people if they make no effort to gird their resources in a more practical or self-supporting manner. This is the answer to those pious economists who assure us that what matters is not what is taken out of our lands, but what is left behind. Which is what exactly? The reply has been given by the Commission for Aid and Development of OECD in its estimate that if the industrial countries continue to increase their gross national product by 3% per annum, it will take the less developed countries 200 years at least to catch up with their standard of living, assuming that the unindustrialized nations reach an annual increase of 5%. Yet how problematic the achievement of this 5% remains in the light of the drain of resources from the less developed countries to the highly developed ones. I mean, literally, he's not even pointing out right now the fact that it was 200 years that they quoted. He's just saying that even that is difficult, which is insane. It's fucking insane. In most African countries, the rate of rise in the domestic product has barely kept pace with the rate of population growth of 2.5% to 3%. It is the less developed countries that continue to carry the burden of the increasing development of the highly developed. Yeah, so basically they're helping the Europe develop so fucking quickly, or the West, while they have to possibly, not even guaranteed, wait 200 years. Insanity. Firestone, for example, has taken 160 million worth of rubber out of the Liberia in the past quarter century. In return, the Liberian government has received a paltry 8 million. The average net profit made by the American company is 3 times the entire Liberian revenue. From south to north, financial and industrial consortia have spread across Africa, busily staking out claims to mineral, metal, and fuel resources, to forest and land produce, and erecting extractive and primary conversion industries in which they are entrenched as stanchions. In Algeria, for example, the really big investment stampede coincided with the War of National Liberation. Between 1951 and 1955, there was an inrush of French and French-American investment greater than ever before. Win or lose, the financial and industrial interests were entrenching themselves within the Algerian economy. Throughout Africa, the industrial giants are supported by financial institutions which dominate the monetary and fiscal sectors of so many of the independent states. Most heavily engaged are the mammoth banking and the insurance institutions and the millionaire companies they control, bolstered by the international institutions like the World Bank and its affiliates. These formidable alliances radiates from the United States, Britain, Germany, France, Holland, Italy, and Sweden. I love the fact that he's being so sarcastic here. He has to be. They move around the I can never pronounce this word, metallurgical and chemical combines with the ECSC, European Coal and Steel Communities, such as SOLAC, GIS, Sidelor, Usinor, Krupp, Tyson, Kuhlman, Pierlotte, Farborg. Okay, so he's just naming a bunch of enterprises. The ICI, they are in the assemblages of bankers, resources, naturals, situated at the same address as the International Bank in Luxembourg. Interesting. So the capitalist financial or investors are in the same address, as he says, as the international banks. Okay. Powerful American corporations like Bethlehem Steel, United States Steel, Republic Steel, Armco Steel, Newmount Mining, Johns Manville, Union Carbide, Olin, Matheson, Alcoa, Kaiser crop up among all the post-war primary materials producing projects on this continent. Their alliances are spread among the leading metallurgical and financial companies of Europe. In combinations that mask the underlying competition. I'm just wondering if there is competition, especially when they have these combines. This competitiveness erupts to the surface when circumstances cause a breakdown in the facade of peaceful coexistence between rival imperialist operations in the sovereign states of others, to which they make assumptions of powerful and use as pawns in the struggle for monopolistic supremacy. So I guess there is. They answered my questions immediately. Gabon is vocal testimony to these assertions. Mass discontent with the existing regimen, which led to the disorders of February 1964, was the occasion utilized by France to warn the United States that she would brook no encroachment on the claims she lays to the manganese, uranium, and oil riches of this, her former colony. Don't touch my colonies. Neglected under the colonial regimen, these resources have assumed an inestimable value to France in the struggle against the advance of American imperialism in Europe. And we know France has been pushing back, even if it's just vocally, since the beginning. So France is not trying to take this laying down, this takeover. In Europe, in the new epoch of atomic rivalry, France sent in paratroopers to force the issue of whose pawn Gabon would remain. I love how he writes this stuff. Like, whose pawn? United States, I mean, it's not funny really because, shit, sucks. But at the same time, he's being completely 100% realistic and he's not lying. Okay, United States Steel may have been the dominant participation in Comelog, which is working on the bed of the vastly rich Franceville manganese deposits, but France, through the CIA de Mines d'Uranium de Franceville, maybe I went too far with the trying to pronounce things the right way, controls the uranium field at the Maunana and is urgently occupied in the attempt to foil the aspirations of the American oil barons to undisputed access to Gabon's offshore petroleum reaches. Okay, all right. France trying to fight. I mean, we're no friend of France. Let's be real. We here trying to unwash charges, dirty up our minds with the truth and facts. We're no friends of the colonializers, or even worse, the neocolonializers, which are basically all the Western world. So that's basically all our home countries, basically. All right, so chapter 7, the truth behind the headlines. Are we going to go into propaganda? Propaganda machine. Okay. Really, to understand what goes on in the world today, it is necessary to understand the economic influences and pressures that stand behind the political events. The financial columns of the world's press give, in fact, the news behind the news. Every few days, we come upon such newspaper announcements as Morgan Grenfell participates in new French bank, or African banking group, or consortium gains voting power in Hewlett, South African sugar monopoly, or new factoring company set up in Germany. These are all newspaper headlines actually taken at random. However, when examined even briefly, the facts reveal an attenuated line of connection between powerful financial groups that exert the most decisive pressure upon the happenings of our time. The facts relate to the men and interests directly involved or indirectly connected with the rearrangements the articles cover. Not that the full facts are ever revealed. On the contrary, they are more often concealed, and it takes knowledge of the careers of the personalities and groups which our articles link to see behind them the inevitable direction of the reported arrangements and their intrinsic meaning in terms of economic and political power. I mean, who knows all that information? I mean, you got to know the people that it's talking about. You got to know their motivations. You got to know their personalities. Jesus Christ, to even know the truth. Let us take the item of the Morgan Grenfell participation in the new French bank. Financial Times, London, 18 December 1964. Morgan Grenfell and Company acts effectively as the London end of the important American banking house of J.P. Morgan and Company, which in 1956 already owned 1/3 of the British company. It should not therefore surprise us to learn that the new continental bank in which Morgan Grenfell is participating is called Morgan et Cia. More especially since 70% of the capital of 10 million new francs is held by the Morgan Guaranty International Finance Corporation and 15% by Morgan Grenfell. What about the remaining 15%? This is divided between two Dutch banks, Hope and Company of Amsterdam and Armies and Zunen of Rotterdam, both of which the Morgan Group has had close association over many years. This association has been drawn even closer by the acquisition of March 1963 of a 14% in both of them by the Morgan Guaranty International Banking Corporation, a subsidiary of Morgan Guaranty Trust. Okay, so basically he's just saying if you know the background, you know who has relationship with who, then you understand the purchases. At least that's what I understand. Okay, how was this? Okay, so now he's going to actually explain it. How was this done? Through the purchase of stock in Bankier Company, a company that consolidated the activities of the two Dutch banks, which nevertheless continue to do business under their own names. This form of 1 in 2 is the accepted formula by which the great combinations attempt to delude the world about their compact formations. Oh, okay. Okay, so this is what he's trying to tell us. Basically, it's just the same bank, but they have different names. They operate in different names. And so you think you're doing business with somebody different, but you're not. You're doing business with the, okay. This is, he's explaining how monopolies work. We know this today. This was in 1965. I hope that we know this today. But yeah, this is, if we didn't know this today, then we know this today now. Okay, chairman of Morgan et Cia is Mr. Pierre Manial, vice president of Morgan Guarantee Trust in Paris, whose brother, Mr. Raymond Manial, is a director of the Bank Worms. Okay. Vice president of Morgan at Cia is the, I don't know what that means, Viscount Harcourt, KCMG, OBE, a managing director of Morgan Grenfell and chairman of 4 important British insurance companies, British Commonwealth, Gresham Fire and Accident, Gresham Life Insurance, and Legal and General. Okay, so then you have the familial relationships that even if you do business with a different bank, you're still kind of doing business with the same because of the family relations. French African banking move captions on item of rather less than 8 lines in the Financial Times of 26 July 1963, which informs us shortly that the network of the Banque Commerciale Africaine in Senegal, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, and Congo Republic has been taken over by Societe Generale, France's second largest bank. Okay, so it is in the single comment, the newspaper allows itself that we find the gist. The arrangements will result in a substantial increase in the volume of deposits held by Societe Generale. Okay, so from one French bank to another. Societe Generale was founded under Napoleon III in 1864. One of the chief participants was Adolf Schneider, a member of the Schneider Iron and Steel Empire, who was at the same period also one of the regents of Banque de France. Both Banque de France and Societe Generale have now been nationalized. This means, in effect, that the French government has a direct interest in the network of the Banque Commerciale Africaine that Societe Generale has taken over. Okay. Nationalism does not stand in the way of the closest associations with the world's most powerful private banking institutions, as the facts given under the title African Banking Group, West Africa, September 22nd, 1963, illustrates. The title, however, is misleading. There is little that is African about the group. The body mainly concerned being the Bankers International Corporation, a subsidiary of Bankers Trust Company, which shares with Morgan Guarantee Trust the commercial business of J.P. Morgan and Company. The mothers are Societe Generale and other unnamed European financial institutions. So it's the same recycling. It's the same recycling of the same companies, and no matter the name, you put African in there just to confuse people. A little bit of propaganda for your names. This is how we do politics in the United States, by the way. And I'm just talking about like bills and stuff like that. We call them something, but we're definitely always having a different intention. This combination of Western banks topped by the long-armed Morgan interests is to extend the formation of banks in just those territories where Société Générale has acquired the interest of Banque Commerciale Africaine, namely Ivory Coast, Senegal, Cameroon, and Congo. The American Federal Reserve Board has given its approval to the Morgan extensions, as have the governments of the African countries concerned. Comment is unnecessary, since we can readily accept the view of the senior vice president and head of the International Banking Department of the Bankers Trust, Mr. G.T. Davies, who happily announced that participation in these four nations will substantially increase the scope of Bankers Trust Company's activities in Africa, a continent in which we are vitally interested. The news item includes with the information the Bankers International Corporation has entity interest in the Liberation Trading and Development Bank and in the United Bank of Africa, Nigeria. This is so good. This is basically how they're presenting it. We don't need comments because he's already spoken. He's already told us that this is good, so we're going to move on from it. We're not going to think about the details. The fact that another sugar consortium, Financial Times, 8 November 1962, has managed to obtain over 50% of the ordinary shares and thereby the majority voting power in the South African sugar monopoly of Sir J. Hewlett and Sons appears on the surface to be entirely unrelated to the other newspaper items we have already scrutinized, but let us go on with our examination. Let's do that. Behind the combination of sugar companies that has gained ascendancy in the Hewlett monopoly are visible the hands of two important South African share issuing and underwriting houses, Philip Hill Higginson and Company, Africa, and Union Acceptance Ltd. Harold Charles Straighton is the dominating personality in the Philip Hill chain of financial and investment companies based in London. Harry F. Oppenheimer of South Africa is chairman of Union Acceptances. Among Mr. Drayton's company appointments and are those of chairman of European and General Corporation, Second Consolidated Trust, and director of Midland Bank and Midland Bank Executor and Trustee Company. Eagle Star Insurance Company, Standard Bank, Consolidated Goldfields, and South Africa and Ashanti Goldfields Corporations. Goodness. Mr. Oppenheimer, among his more than 70 companies appointments, includes those of chairman of African Explosives and Chemical Industries, Anglo-American Corporation of South Africa, De Beers Consolidation Mines, and First Union Investment Trust. He is the director of Africa and European Investment. Okay, you don't have to convince me. It is a monopoly. They are basically the same people. He is part of all of these different companies that go into these countries to do whatever it is to do their investment and stuff. There's no competition. They are the same people. I get it. I'm not arguing with Kwame. I'm just saying he's definitely, carrying the point with his writing. All right, let me take a sip and then we'll continue. Okay. Deputy Chairman of Anglo-American Corporation is Sir K. Acute, who is also a director of the British South African Company and Standard Bank. Co-director with the Deputy Chairman of Anglo-American Corporation on the British South African Company is Mr. Robert Annan, who sits beside Mr. Drayton on the board of Consolidated Goldfields. Mr. Annan also has the distinction of being an extraordinary director of Scottish Amicable Life Insurance Society. A colleague of Mr. Drayton's on both the Midland Bank and the bank's executor and trust company is the R.T. Hun Lord Baillieu KBE CMG. Is that all his name? God damn. Who happens to be at the same time deputy chairman of the Central Mining and Investment Corporation on which Harry F. Oppenheimer is to be found. Lord Baillieu sits also on English, Scottish, and Australian Bank. I would need an actual diagram to be able to actually consume all of these details. I can see what he's saying. I can see the points. They're all like interchangeable. So all of these, this guy sits on all these boards and this other guy sits on all these boards, and then they kind of like, yeah. So I mean, I get it, but I can't really follow all of these details without having a board, because I see what he's trying to say, but my brain does not work like that. I need to actually, maybe I'll do a board for next time. Oh, that sounds like a good idea. That can encourage you guys to come back, because when I come back, I will go ahead and do a board and try to figure this particular example. That would be fun. Okay, I think I'm going to do that. Okay, another director of Standard Bank is Mr. William Anthony Acton, whose close ties with the banking world are seen in his deputy chairmanship of the National Bank and directorship of the Bank of London and Montreal, Standard Bank Finance and Development Corporation, Bank of London and South America, and Bank of West Africa. It is certainly not sheer coincidence that Lord Luke of Pavenham has a seat with H.C. Drayton. H.C. Drayton just keeps coming up. I think this is who we're talking about. It's our main man. Okay, all right. So H.C. Drayton on the board of Ashanti Gold Fields, and occupies which Mr. Acton is seated. Nor can it be by mere chance that Mr. Esmond Charles Baring, former director and London agent of Anglo-American Cooperation and associated with a number of other companies in the Oppenheimer Group, is a member of the family that operates the merchant house of Baring Bros and maintains the closest links with the investment world. Okay. Other important personages who grace the board. See, he's trying to encourage me to do a board. Of the British South African Company in 1963 were the late Sir Charles J. Hambro, P.V. Embrys Evans, and Viscount Malvern, P.C.C.H. K.C.M.H. Is that their title? Like, what in the hell? Okay. Sir Charles Hambro was the senior director of the Bank of England. He chaired the biggest of the City of London's merchant banks, the 176 million euros, I think, Hambro's Bank, and presided over Union Cooperation, the South African mining finance group, which embraces numerous of the Anglo-American interests associated with the Harry F. Oppenheimer concerns. Okay. The Standard Bank of South Africa crops up once more among the directorship of Lord Malvern, which includes Scottish Rhodesian Finance and Merchant Bank of Central Africa. The last named bank is a creation of the Rothschild Banking Group. Hey, somebody we know is the bad guy. In which one finds Bank Lambert, one of the important Belgian banks. Some 17.5% of whose interests are concentrated in Africa, notably 17%, okay, notably in the Congo. The bank also has an interest in another Rothschild's creation, the Five Arrows Securities Company, an investment house operating in Canada and under Rockefeller influence. Mr. Paul V. Emrys Evans, British South African Company, vice president, is now president of the Oppenheimer's expansive Anglo-American cooperation, also upon that of Barclays Bank, DCO. A seat on Rio Tinto Zinc Corporation brings Mr. Emrys Evans into the company of Lord Baillieu, its deputy chairman, and his associates with H.C. Drayton. Oh, H.C. Drayton again. I swear to God, I am getting lost in the details. I'm not going to even lie to you guys, but I know H.C. Drayton is, I know whenever he comes up, I know that he is the person we're talking about. Okay, Several of the leading British banks and insurance companies, and basically all of this details is basically just to let us know how all of these, banks and companies basically own everything. They're all interchangeable, and so it makes it very difficult. Basically, what Nkrumah is trying to let us know, to teach us, is how difficult it has been for Africa to get out of these contracts. Because if you need something from, if you don't want to get one contract because it is predatory, because it's basically extortion, then how are you going to? I'm basically talking about, we're reading Neocolonialism. We read as much as we can each stream, and then we kind of just talk about what is going on. In the beginning, we have notes, so you can catch up in my profile. You have the you can get to my notes. In the beginning of each stream, I go through everything that we've read up to this point. So this is us just talking about the banking system and how they make it so hard for Africans to not get these predatory and these terrible contracts that keeps them in, that basically have huge interest rates, that extract more from them than they actually get, and sometimes even to the detriment. One example that we learned earlier in the book was the example of Nigeria and Ghana and the production of cocoa. And we learned that I think it was like 1940 something, they were producing like 200 or 300,000 tons of cocoa. And then, 20 or 30 years later, they either doubled or tripled their production of cocoa, only to make less money. Less money, even though they're producing more. And it's because they are in these contracts where, as the production of whatever it is, the goods that are produced in the Western countries are increased, because you get more, you produce more, you give more jobs, you make more money, blah, blah, blah. You then have these contracts where you're just like, you have to produce more for us or else we would not buy from you. And so they have to produce more no matter what, even if they end up making less. And because they're discouraged from using profits on, and we went over all of the reasons and the ways that they're discouraged from this stuff, but they're discouraged in a very, very real way, as in like, you can't use your money for this or that. They are not able to industrialize. And so therefore they can't get their equipment that they need to get them to produce more in an efficient way. They can't get the pesticides that they need to get it so that their crop doesn't keep dying because of the insects or whatever the case may be. So it costs more for them to produce more. So they end up producing double or triple the amount of whatever they were doing 20, 30 years ago, only to literally make less money. So anyways, this portion, we're talking about the banking system and how difficult it is for them not to get into these predatory contracts because they're monopolies. They all know each other. They are all buddies. They're all in all these different committees. This in particular has been a maze of interchangeable names and all of these different committees and all these. We just know, the Drayton guy. And I think that next stream, which is tomorrow, and again, I stream for 2 hours. We're about to end in 30 minutes. So, so an hour and a half from now, 2:30 my time, I do my streams. And the first 30 minutes, I think tomorrow, if I do this board where I will take Mr. Drayton and kind of connect him to all of this different, this maze of people and companies and whatever, and seeing if we can actually connect it in the way that he is basically, telling us. But this is why it's hard for them to be like, no, I don't want that contract. That doesn't work for me, because nobody else is going to do business with you. You're not going to be able to, because all of these companies are the same. If they're not the same, they have the same people in the boards. If that's not the case, they have the familiar agreements. If not, that they're in syndicates and committees and so on and so forth. So they agree with each other on what kind of predatory agreements they're going to be placing on these colonial territories. And in this example, in the example of the book, it's Africa that we're talking about, but they do it to, of course, other nations as well. All right, so let's continue. Okay, several of the leading British banks and insurance companies and some of their European associate participate in the Standard Bank. Its chairman, Sir Frank Cyril Hawker, used to represent the Bank of England, and its vice chairman, Sir F.W. Ross, represents the National Provincial Bank. WA Acton's banking associations have already been outlined above. Yeah, we'll see, because I don't remember them, just because there was so many of them. Okay, H.C. Drayton, oh, here you are again, brings in the interests of his own financial groups, as well as those of the Midland Bank and Eagle Star Insurance. Sir E.L. Hall Patch, a director of the Standard Bank of South Africa, who's resigned at the July 1963 annual general meeting, is director of Commercial Union Assurance Company. Sir G.S. Harvey Watt is an associate of H.C. Drayton's on Eagle Star Insurance and the Midland Bank. He is chairman of Consolidated Gold Fields and a director of the American Zinc, Lead, and Smelting Company of the U.S. All right. I hope we're not going to keep tying these people together. All right, let's see. John Francis Perdukes brings the interests of the Commonwealth Development Corporation into the bank, as well as those of Westminster Bank and as Westminster, the Bank of New South Wales, and sundry other financial and investment concerns. William Michael Rodson, as vice chairman of the Joint East and Central African Board of the Standard Bank, brings a bear all those vested interests joined in the board, while he represents separately the investment of the financial holding, merchant, shipping, and plantation companies of the broker bros. McConnell groups, they're basically just doing each other's business, which has a monopoly grip upon the economy of British Guinea. Charles Hyde Villiers holds a brief for Banque Belge Ltd. And Sun Life Insurance Society. Banque Belge Ltd. is the London outlet of Banque de la Société Générale de Belgique and controls in its turn, among others, Banque de Congo Belge, Belgian American Banking Corporation, American Bank and Trust Company, Continental America Fund of Baltimore, USA, and Canada Fund, Montreal, Canada. All right. The headline, all right, did we finish with these? Let's see. The headline, New Factoring Company Set Up in Germany, Financial Times for October 1963, has a superficial, innocuous look. However, the briefest glance at the test takes us at once right into the world of international banking, for we meet extensions of British and American capital that have stimulated and supported an international factoring venture which has extended in a very short time across 4 continents. The focal point is a Swiss holding company, International Factors AG of Chur. Its nominal capital is FRS 6,000, about 490,000. That was 6 million, sorry. It has now established activity in Germany, where a company, International Factors Deutschland, has been set up in conjunction with 3 German banks. The Chur company retaining 50% of the capital. Of the rest, 20% is held by Frankfurter Bank, 25% by Mittelrheinische Kreditbank, Dr. Hornbeck and Company, and 5% by the private bank in Frankfurt. George Hawk. Frankfurter Bank's portion, however, will be enlarged by the fact that it has acquired a 51% stake in Hardware and Company by way of share exchange. Alrighty then. We're gonna take a break. I think we're gonna end here because we're getting a bit too deep in the weeds, at least from my own way, ability to follow all these things. I mean, I get the main point. Whenever it's difficult to do business because all of these companies basically are, you never know who really actually owns the company because it can be under one name, but that company can be owned by several companies. And, maybe the company that you were just trying to get out of business with actually owns a portion of not the main company, but the company that owns the main company of the company that you're trying to do business with. So it is a bit of a disadvantage, not a bit, it's completely disadvantaged, but it is very convoluted and I think very difficult to follow. So I'm going to leave that alone for now. I'll read some of this stuff on my own, but let's go ahead and watch some videos and see if we learn anything from them. And then we'll end the stream for today. All right. Okay, let's see what this lady has to say.
Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger have dragged Ukraine to the United Nations, accusing Kiev of supporting terrorism.
On May 6, 2026, pictures taken by Malian soldiers surfaced on social media showing that a badge of the Ukrainian Intelligence Service, GUR, had been found on the body of a neutralized terrorist following the attempted coup on April 25. While this on its own clearly suggests Ukrainian involvement in the joint attacks involving the terrorist group JNIM and the Tuareg separatist group FLA, existing evidence before this has gone beyond suggestion to actual proof of Ukrainian participation. Ukraine itself has publicly admitted its involvement in an ambush of a Malian military convoy in 2024, boasting extensively about the training and drone support that it has provided these groups since 2024. Now, Ukraine has successfully sold itself to the world as a small nation bravely resisting the aggression of its more powerful eastern neighbor. But its role as an aggressor against Mali and the wider AES region, coupled with its expanding junior role in the empire's military adventures around the world, reveals a more accurate picture. It is now a state-sized imperial blunt force tool used in all the empire's dirty business all over the world, comparable maybe to that.
Doesn't Ukraine have to be focusing on something right now? I swear they were doing something.
Blue and white entity that shall not be. As Ukraine's internal politics have been stage managed by the US empire through color revolutions, so too are the country's external actions choreographed to suit the empire's interests. Nowhere is this more evident than in the war with Russia that began in 2022, where it constantly bombs Russian energy installations far from the front lines of the conflict or even outside the warring country's territories. The use of this absurd tactic makes perfect sense when one realizes that this country, which Washington hijacked after the fall of the Soviet Union, as part of an ongoing plan to encircle Russia, is simply giving Russia a foretaste of what complete Western encirclement would mean. And true to its form as an imperial weapon, Ukraine's external actions are, first and foremost, conditioned by the needs and calculations of its imperial backers, beyond any claims of its own national interests. This is why as soon as the US and Israel and their Arab proxies met their match in the Iran war and began hemorrhaging billions of dollars in missile interceptors to counter Iran's drones and missile systems to no effect, Zelensky.
So this is this is kind of like the whole encircling thing, where you have all of these bases encircling Iran, and then you kind of have the same thing with Russia. I think that's what he's saying. I don't know about all of the bases. I don't know too much about that portion of it. In my head, the propaganda, the Western propaganda, and also just we see Russia as a big bad guy and Ukraine as a little country. But when you think about NATO and all of the things that NATO has, done to prop up imperialism and how imperialism and neocolonialism has affected the previous colonialized territories or now neo-colonial territories, which are independent countries, then you can kind of see, or even just when you think about how NATO's military was built for the sole purpose. I mean, this agreement of countries of peace and partnership or whatever has a military Why? So that it can protect resources from these nations. But yes, Mali is a threat. We already know that, and a lot of some of the other West African, Southwest African countries are as well, because anybody that wants to, we've already discussed this in the previous chapters, as long as the big enemy of capitalist and the honorable, capitalist with democracy system that we have, this is the only way that you can really reach your goals and really be, everything that you were meant to be. We're propagandized to think that this is just the way that you can be fully free, because you have to propagandize against a system that basically takes away their resources and their people from the imperial world. And we already heard what Britain had said, right? They said, back in 1965 in One News, some leader guy published that Britain has to worry about, one, not letting communism rise, not letting communism and socialism rise, and two, not letting any territory in the world not be able to be purchased or to be able to do business in from Britain. So basically, that's the biggest threat to them. It's like when any country basically takes away from the imperial system, that's a threat, especially when socialism is so contagious. If other countries decide, especially African countries, decide to take away their resources and their people from the imperial world, that is a big, big, big problem for them. So they will do anything that they can to prevent it. And Ukraine is just another arm of that. Of course, they should be minding their own business because they have shit that they have to be taking care of right now. But hey, I guess they have a few military people to spare.
He offered them Ukrainian drone expertise and deployed several of these experts to Arab countries, even as this expertise could have aided in reclaiming territories lost to Russian forces in Ukraine. It is also why in faraway South Africa, the Ukrainian Association of South Africa, UAZA, a diaspora group with direct links to Kiev, is fomenting trouble in an ongoing attempt to interfere in South African politics, with the end goal of making South Africa abandon the BRICS bloc. The fact that South African membership of BRICS has no relevant connection to the Russia-Ukraine war only goes to show that the agitation has little to do with Ukrainian self-determination and everything to do with the empire's grand strategy to economically isolate Russia and China using pawns like Ukraine. But with more overt militaristic involvement in African affairs, Ukraine is now demolishing whatever credibility is left in its attempt to pose as an oppressed state. Ukraine may have got imperial plaudits for its drone attacks against Russian troops and ships in Libyan waters in December 2025 and March 2026 in its secret war with Russia. But its actions further inflamed an already unstable area plagued by decades of imperialist violence and created an ecological disaster, ultimately doing further damage to its already damaged reputation in Africa. And while Zelensky's failed July 2025 attempt to cause a diplomatic rift between Ghana and Burkina Faso by announcing a non-existent defense agreement may have given the Ukrainian president and his backers a laugh, what that event and others like it show is that Ukraine is another rampaging imperial bulldog whose claims of national defense are only a thin disguise for Western power projection. Countries in the global south will do well to treat this entity exactly the way it has presented itself.
Okay, guys, I think we're going to end a little early today. But remember, you guys can go to my profile and you can go to, what is it called? My Discord. This is my first week here streaming. Actually, this is my second week. Second day, actually. So I just started to do all this stuff. But anyways, you can go to my Discord channel. You can see the notes. I will be putting them in. I put them in daily, so I will put them in a few minutes after we end today. But you can then see everything that we've read up to this point. So you can follow. And then tomorrow we're going to go live once again, basically 2 hours earlier. So at 2:30 is what I meant to say. At 2:30. Okay. Thank you guys for joining, and hopefully I will see you tomorrow. See ya.